Hello and welcome to Unboxed, the podcast that dives deep into the world of custom packaging and innovative brand experiences. In each episode, we'll be exploring the latest trends, innovations, and best practices in the design and packing industry, and then taking a look at how they can help businesses like yours to create memorable and impactful brand experiences. I'm your host, Sam Johnston. Let's get started. So I'm your host, Sam Johnston, and in this episode, we'll be talking to Lan Ho, who will be giving us lots of amazing insight and gold, I'm sure, but you might recognize her as a recent finalist from Gordon Ramsay's Food Stars show. She's the founder of the Fat Miilk organization, Chicago's first Vietnamese CPG coffee company, and we're very excited to have her on the show. So it's great to have you here, Lan.
Yes, thank you for having me, Sam. I'm so excited to dig in and talk all about packaging, CPG. This is really up my wheelhouse, so let's dig in.
Love it. Yeah, well, we're a little bit starstruck today because it's not every day that we get somebody that's been on such a high level and high profile show.
Oh my goodness.
And we do have a set of questions that, that the audience may have well come here today to get some of those answers. So we are going to get to those. But before we get into those, would you be able to just give us kind of the high level story, if you like, of what brought you here today to this point as the founder of Fat Miilk?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I started Fat Miilk, I was actually a board certified pharmacist, right? So very much two completely different industries. I really worked my way up, going from spending 10 years of my life in higher education and going into an industry that was the complete opposite of creativity. And so during the pandemic, I actually had this opportunity to start my own thing. It was a concept that I've always wanted to do. And throughout my journey in school and as a pharmacist, I was kind of laying down the groundwork to really launch my own thing. Yep. And, we can go into pharmacy. I did it for all the wrong reasons, which if you watch the show, you'll be able to hear and understand a little bit more behind my story. Both my parents are Vietnam refugees, and that really made an impression on me as I kind of got acclimated into the US, right? And so I went the traditional route of education, but I always wanted to do something that, really was big on storytelling, creativity. I think all in all, out of all of my siblings, I'm the one that has the most knack for entrepreneurship because I really do find that to be so compelling, right? Yeah. And the immigrant story, we're all entrepreneurs. We bring something from our native country here because that's the only way to live. We have to either cook our food or do something that we've learned because we have so many barriers to get acclimated into the US system. So long story short, I come from a very entrepreneurial family. Both my parents are entrepreneurs. And, as I'm, working my way up the corporate ladder as a pharmacist, I wanted to create something that I knew was missing in the market, but also I was able to flex my creative juices, right? And so I actually ended up getting furloughed during the pandemic for 2 months. And during those 2 months is when I launched Fat Miilk. So Fat Miilk is Chicago's first Vietnamese CPG company. And essentially I import all the beans from Vietnam myself, and then I do everything else here in the States, mainly in Chicago, right? And throughout this process, I learned so much about where I thrive the most in business. Obviously, we wear all the hats in the beginning, right? But where I saw where I lit up the most was when it came down to being able to build a brand that was all around building consumer loyalty, right? And being able to create a lifestyle out of that. And I feel like I did a pretty good job being able to do that with the first version of Fat Miilk, because it definitely caught the eyes of Gordon Ramsay and his team. And I think that was the communication that got me to be on the show and ended up, taking it all the way to the finale.
Wow. I mean, what a journey. I think we're going to we'll touch on a lot of these different parts as we get through these questions, but tell us just a little bit about what that initial first step was like. So stepping out of the pharmacy, the lab coat environment into the business, was that just one day you're going to stop and move on, or what was that transition like?
Yeah, look, I told myself I'm going to do this full time. At that point, I actually incorporated Fat Miilk in 2019, right? And I was already looking at, while I was working as a pharmacist, looking at farms in Vietnam and reaching out to roasters and et cetera. And so when the time came for me to go all in on this, it was a no-brainer. It was kind of the universe saying, stop stalling and do this already. So I'm going to furlough you.
Yeah.
And when they asked me to come back 2 months later, I was just like, absolutely not. Like, this could not have been, uh, the perfect storm for me to take a bet on myself and go on and flex my creative juices. Cause, we saw a lot of initial success and hype around the brand. Bon Appetit picked us up 2 months after we launched and put us on their highly recommend list. And that was a crazy whirlwind for us. And then from there, I just kept learning and learning and learning. But I think like I said, I think naturally I'm in my element as an entrepreneur. And I think it was just a very easy transition for me to know that I know I can do this. But I mean, don't get me wrong, the financials and the lifestyle of going from structure to having to create your own structure and going from having a steady paycheck to figure out how you're going to fight for that dollar is definitely a transition. It's something that I'm still learning till this day.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. It's a phenomenal success that you've been able to achieve. So it's really awe-inspiring to see that journey take place. And
I appreciate it.
Whilst you were on that show, we're not going to take too much of this show based on just talking about Gordon Ramsay, but it was very complimentive of what you're doing and the product, and kind of his experience of the brand was very, very positive from what I could see on the show. What was that experience like working with him and the team behind the scenes?
Wow. Well, it's season 1 of Gordon Ramsay's Food Stars, right? So I will say the whole production team and even Gordon himself, there's a lot of figuring out behind the scenes as well. I mean, this isn't, Top Chef or what's it called, Master Chef that's on season 15 or something like that now. It was very much having their team figure out how to work with 15 entrepreneurs under one roof who have a million things going on, and we just have a different standard of how we value our time and what we're expected to do. Like, obviously this is a business show in the food and bev space, but at the same time we are representatives of ourselves as leaders and on top of representing our brand. So don't even get me started on the anxiety that we all felt on the show. But I think all in all, this is a testament to business in general. Like, when I was asked to be on the show, I had to leave everything I had going on in Chicago and film in LA for 2 months. And, I told myself, if I'm really in this to go big, to do this thing, to build this brand, I got to take risk. And that's exactly how I felt the show was for me. It was taking a big freaking risk.
Well, it paid off, right? That's awesome.
I would say so.
Well, I'm sure that we'll put the link in the show notes. People can go off and see that if they want to and get some of those clips. But let's move the conversation here on to what the listeners are potentially coming here for. And there's our listeners usually are people that either are aspirational, so they have this product idea, they want to take it to market, they want to build a business, and they're starting to widen their sphere of influence and knowledge so that they can arm themselves and make better decisions and then move ahead. Equally, on the flip side of that, we have people that are in much larger corporations. Maybe they're inside internal new product development teams, maybe they're inside the innovation departments of in bigger facilities, and they're bringing new things to market and looking for new perspectives. So those are the two extremes of the audience, and of course there's people in between. But to kick this off, the first question will be, how, in your experience, do packaging and product brand experiences contribute to creating loyal customer bases? And whilst you're answering that, is there any effective strategies that you've seen for doing that?
Yeah, one thing I will say that I've learned about myself over the years is how intentional I am. And I never really thought that I was that kind of person, but I question every decision that we make, right? And I think first and foremost, you have to understand the space that you're playing in. And for me, it's CPG, consumer packaged goods, right? So that's how I launched the company. We're building out our Chicago flagship storefront right now, going the retail route. But how we started was all about CPG. And when I understand that visual as a consumer, I'm a huge fan of CPG. So when I go to Target, I'm literally that person who goes there for one thing and stays there for like hours. And I'm just reading every single package. I'm just enamored by packaging and just products in general, right? And so when I started Fat Miilk, I understood the category. I understood the industry that we play in because I am a consumer, right? And so having known that, every decision that I've made very early on was betting on the details. And it was doing things that a lot of new brands typically bypass for the sake of limited resources, right? They end up putting their money elsewhere in their sales team or whatever. I'm not saying that's not important, but when it comes to CBG, you have to be able to communicate essentially who you are, who you're not, what you're about, why you should buy this, why you should keep buying this through a one package, right? And then obviously you have to have your digital footprint. And so for me, it was really understanding CBG, it was understanding consumer behavior, and it was utilizing all the resources that we had and being able to create a product and like have that clarity around that product to then have people excited about looking us up online and then coming back for a subscription plan or something like that. And I think it's really unfortunate to see a couple of my friends are starting their own business, and they thank me because I'm always telling them, trust me, do it right the first time. I'm telling you, don't, if you can, avoid putting it in brown craft bags, avoid just doing it just to get it to market. Do it right from the beginning, because I'm telling you, it's hard enough to just go out there and sell a product. But if you can't sell a product that you stand by and you know that this is ultimately like the best representation of what you guys are all about, branding is all about a vibe, and the best brands that have done it right are the brands who have built a tribe around their packaging and around their whole essence of who they are. And I think it definitely starts with that custom packaging right then and there.
Yeah, you're speaking our language on that tribe side of things. A lot of our guests have mentioned that kind of who is that early tribe that either exists or you're going to create, and how do you mirror back to them what that identity means. And you've done a fantastic job of this within your brand. I think that immediately, as soon as you see any of the materials that you have, you immediately get the emotion behind it, and you kind of start to understand the brand identity that comes behind this. There's not a lot of brands that, if you were to say, what would be your brand's version of a hotel or your brand's version of something else, what would that feel like? What would the vibe be? And with yours, I feel like I understand that, which is really refreshing, I think, and really unique. And when you were creating your brand and starting to think about this and formulate your plans, were there any inspiration organizations that you've seen doing this really well that, even if it's not in your category, you thought that's inspirational?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the brands that can evoke a customer to be so proud to say that they spent their money there are the brands who are doing it so right? And so Apple, classic, right? Like if you buy something from Apple, you want to share the unboxing. You want it to be known that you're an Apple user, right? And same thing for brands who, fashion brands who, like Supreme, they very built a cult-like following, and people want to communicate to other people, like, look, I shop at Supreme because this is my vibe, this is who I am. They've almost created an identity based on the choices that they make in their fashion sense, right? And so, and in their lifestyle. And I think those are some of the most powerful, intriguing brands that I just obsess over. And I think that was the intentionality that I brought into building Fat Miilk and the kind of energy that I'm putting behind the decisions that we're making. It's like, either you're drinking Fat Miilk or you're visiting a Fat Miilk storefront, or, you're repping us in some fashion, you're proud. And that was essential to me. Like, I wanted a proud, loyal customer base, proud first, more than anything.
I love that. Yeah. And did it take a lot of iterations or evolution of the brand to get to where it is today? Or did you pretty much know where you wanted to go and nail it first off?
Yeah. So the first version of Fat Miilk very much was, I played very into the concept of Fat Miilk. So a lot of people don't know Fat Miilk really equates to condensed milk, right? And for people who don't know, Vietnamese coffee, the most typical way of enjoying it is with a little bit of condensed milk, because the Robusta bean is so bold and strong and nutty. So it's just a nice, really perfect pairing. And so there's a lot of education and misperceptions of Vietnamese coffee. And so I played into the Fat Miilk a little bit too much, and it was beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it was confusing from a scale perspective. And so when I came back from filming the show, that was my first and hopefully last attempt of reiterating the brand. And we've been, I went a major rebrand that's been going on for a year and 4 months. And we're actually launching our custom website with all new packaging,
Nice.
whole new look and feel on Black Friday. So midnight
Exciting.
on Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Love
So
it. That's awesome.
I think it definitely took some iterations, but I think all in all, I was very proud of every stage that I built it in for those reasons.
Awesome. Well, maybe there's some advice here for the listeners, right? The next question is, what are some of the biggest challenges or roadblocks that businesses like you've experienced face when it comes to product branding, brand experiences? What are some of those and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, honestly, is being able to get that feedback, right? Like, especially with CBG and just packaging, like it's very difficult to execute something at such low minimums, right? So like even me deciding to rebrand the company, for lack of a better phrase, it was kind of startup suicide. You know what I mean? But having the opportunities from the show and where we were going, I had to approach the brand from a scalability, logistics, and high clarity communication on who we are and who we're not, from just for growth purposes. So that was the reason behind that, right? But I think early on, before I decided to do that, if we were to go and print packaging, I mean, we can't just print 100 and see what happens, or 500. I mean, that would cost, like, just your margins would just be detrimental to your business sometimes. And I think the biggest challenge is really taking the time to build out that concept early on, almost build out concept before people. The product itself is people focused. You got to have a good product, no matter what. That's just the name of the game. But when it comes to packaging and your look and your vibe and your visuals, that concept should come before people, in my opinion. So figuring out what that concept is and then going into print is the most important thing. A lot of people would just go straight into it, and now they're stuck with so much excess after they get that feedback from their customers and it doesn't make sense, or they realize they miss there's a missed opportunity or whatever the case is. So I think it really is trial and error, but I think if a lot of people can take that time to really understand their positioning and their concept, I think that could potentially ease some of those burdens in the beginning.
That's gold. Yeah, I think the listeners are getting some good out of that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's take out our mystic ball here and look a little bit into the future, because things are changing, not just on a sort of decade basis, but on a minute basis these days. So how do you see the future of packaging and branding experiences evolving over the next, say, 5 years? And what could businesses be doing today to stay ahead of that curve?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, people need to, I think a lot of brands need to recognize that it's a non-negotiable. I see a lot of brands out there in the food and bev space who, like, some of the most well-renowned brands and prestigious and brands out there, they don't even have branded cups. They don't even have branded bags. And like, that blows my mind, because I think it's such a small detail, that could really elevate the overall reputation of your brand, right? And I just think, look, it's a non-negotiable. Like, people's attention span, how quickly it is for customers to be able to jump ship and test something else out. If you can't capture them and invest the money and the resources and the time to do it early on, I think brands are really missing an opportunity there to just show that you're a legit company. You're one that thinks through, it has the intentionality, right? I just think so many brands these days that I see really attack branding and packaging and the future of their success in the short term, when I think they attack it from a short-term perspective, but wanting long-term longevity, right? But the reality is that long-term longevity takes time to build, and it takes it from day one, especially as a CBG brand. Sometimes you don't get a second choice. Second chance. And I think doing the hard things in the detail things early on sets you up way further than if you gradually, oh, let me just put something in a craft bag or something like that. See how people are liking it. Well, people you can't necessarily gauge it if they like it or not, because that's ultimately not a true representation of what you do, and how you are. And so I think it's a waste of time, it's a waste of energy, and a waste of money for business owners to think that that can be something added on. In my opinion, I just think you got to go head first, all in from the jump, and I
love that.
Be able to communicate that very early on.
That's a good rallying call, I think, for all brands, not just the new ones that are coming to market.
100%.
So what's next for Fat Miilk? Like, what does 2024 look like? What's your plans? Maybe you don't want to say too much, but where's it going?
So right now, Fat Miilk is really adopting the clicks and bricks business model, right? So we started off really e-commerce, wholesale partners, kind of going into mom and pop retail distribution, stuff like that, really gauging how our customers are really enjoying this emerging market. Vietnamese coffee is an emerging category within the coffee industry at large. So there is a lot to learn and a lot to pivot on a consistent basis, right? Especially in the early days. And we started off digitally, and we're going to continue to optimize that as much as possible. But I also recognize that in order for us to really give people a true representation of our brand and have them experience it the way that I personally want them to experience it, and especially being coffee, right? It's a commodity. It's something that people want on a daily basis, that we have to exist on the ground level. And there's a lot of brands who are definitely taking that approach. And so for 2024, we are building out our Chicago flagship storefront that's going to launch in February. Thank you. So it's coming up. We're in full construction mode right now. And I think, as we launch our new website, our first storefront, I think 2024 is really building the groundwork and the foundation for how 2025 is going to just explode, and have a lot of concepts be solidified in 2024, and having people get really excited about what we're doing.
Love that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of momentum building. And you're an incredibly busy person, so we really appreciate you giving the time here to give the listeners some thoughts, give them all that gold that you've offered in there. And I'm sure that everyone's going to be following along and seeing this journey as you guys grow and develop the brand and continue to move. For me personally, it's one of those brands that I'm really excited to see this new evolutions happen, in particular on this holiday coming up. So thank you so much for giving us your time here. It's really, really appreciated. And that's it for this episode of Unboxed. So thank you to our guest, Lan, for sharing all of these insights and expertise with us. If anybody did want to follow you, what's the best way for them to do that? Is there a specific handle or one page in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're pretty active on social media. We love Instagram. So it's Fat Miilk with 2 I's in milk. And that's our handle for Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of that good stuff. And then my personal Instagram is I am Lan Ho, and I would love to connect with people on there too.
Awesome. We'll put those into the show notes as well, so everyone can just click that and get onto that. So if you're wherever you're watching this podcast, hit into the description, drop down, and you'll see it in there. But if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review wherever you're listening to this. It means a lot to us and all the algorithm overlords. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, you can reach us on email at unboxed@merchantboxes.com. And until next time, keep thinking outside the box and creating unforgettable brand experiences. Thank you for listening to today's episode. It was sponsored by Merchant Boxes. Merchant Boxes provide custom packaging to large businesses and small creators that customers love. If you are looking for award-winning custom package designs that make your business and products stand out from the competition, click the link in the show notes to find out more.